My name is Michael Pagel, the Program Manager of Greening Healthcare, and welcome to our webinar, Building on the Best, Achieving World-Class Energy Performance in New Hospitals. This is our annual update on the energy performance for the new P3 hospitals in Ontario. It's an important topic that we keep bringing back each year because every new hospital that we build can be better than those before it, and we kind of at this point expect that they should be. And learning from the data that we can present and the metrics we establish and having these conversations, we hope will help continue to achieve this. Hospitals are presented anonymously by code. If you're a representative of one of these hospitals that's participating and you don't know what your code is, just send me a note through the chat or by email and I can get that to you. You can use the Q&A button for questions that we can answer live or follow up after. We do have quite a few people expected today, so I don't know exactly how many questions we'll get or if we'll be able to get to them all. We'll try our best. The webinar is recorded and will be posted to our website by the end of the week at greeninghc.com. And we're pleased to be partnering on this event with CHES. And as always, thank you to our program sponsors for their support, and Bridge Gas and Thermogenics. Greening Healthcare is run under the nonprofit organization Climate Challenge Network. And our host for today, Ian Jarvis, the Executive Director of Climate Challenge Network, will get us started now.
Thank you, Michael. And we begin, as always, by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we're on today, which we each call home. In Canada, from coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of the Inuit, Métis, and the First Nations people that share these lands with us. I acknowledge that I today am speaking from the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Mississaugas of the Credit River. It's hopefully a respectful introduction of acknowledging the background of our land and so much of the conversation that we have today about reconciliation. Let me continue with welcoming all of you. We've got today a large number of hospitals. We were just chatting a moment ago that we've got the highest attendance that we've seen in these events so far. We've got hospitals from a number of places around the world. We've got design engineers, we've got government representatives, we've got industry, we've got academia, all with a real interest in the transformational change that we know has to happen within hospital facilities over the coming 2 to 3 decades to get us ready for not the if, but the how of reaching net zero by 2050. That is both essential from the science and required by legislation on both sides of the Atlantic. And this is all about the transformational change related to that, the challenges, the opportunities, the tasks that we have to undertake. And even though, as Michael said, we've been reporting on the performance of Ontario's growing fleet of hospitals for the past 3 years now, we're seeing this very much as a watershed event. We're bringing together new perspectives, international perspectives, and we're seeing this very much as the beginning of the conversation around how do we get there from here. And it's very much a big tent. Everybody's on board. We need everybody's help. And again, the science tells us that this is absolutely necessary. We'll move fairly quickly through the early part, the context and the recognition of the top performers, the hospitals that are saving the most and performing the best. Please concentrate, because you can get the recording of the whole webinar will be up by the end of the week. And based on the findings today, what we hear today, the report will be finalized by the end of the month, and both of those will show you later. You can find on the Greening Healthcare website. So see this as the beginning of the conversation. The real interest here is in our extraordinary panel that we have today that brings some really cool, different perspectives to the common challenge, the common opportunity. And at the end, we'll talk a little bit about what we see being the next stages and how we see this whole initiative moving forward. So once again, welcome, and let's get at it. Background will keep fairly simple. If you're regular Greening Healthcare attendees, We've talked a lot about what's happening with respect to climate change and with particular reference to the healthcare sector. So I think we understand that now. So again, this is not about the if or the background, it's about the how. But the core premise of what greening healthcare is contributing to this conversation is around data. So we have been actively benchmarking hospitals now across North America, looking at their actual energy use. We have the technology, as they say, to weather normalize between different locations. And this gives a sense of the range of energy use and the comparable emissions for different, in this case, acute care hospitals, larger ones over 100,000 square feet, and only acute care. The whole data set is over well over 1,000 now. There's 250 in this particular set. And we're looking for the most efficient hospitals in the world because, again, the core premise here is that a lot of the technology and operational practices are already out there. And if we can track them down, document them, verify them, and share them with everybody, that is the best contribution to moving this agenda forward. So you'll see a lot more over the coming 12 months around finding the most energy efficient hospitals in the world, learning from them. Today, we're going to look particularly at the now 17 operational hospitals in Ontario and what we can learn from them. And those lessons get richer every year. The other piece of the background I wanted to give you is we don't think that in principle, the roadmap to net zero is that complicated, especially in hospitals. So the 3 steps here, maximizing energy efficiency is self-evident. It's the most economical and efficient way of getting the numbers down. And from the previous chart, we can tell you, we can get pretty much close to half the way from current baselines to net zero just by getting efficiency right. And that is the #1 task of every hospital on the line here. Where do you stand? How do you get to where you should be at the top of the benchmark chart? Heat recovery in hospitals is a big deal. That's one of the first discussions we had with the folks in the UK. Hospitals generate a huge amount of heat from equipment, from process loads. Recovering that heat, again, is the second most economical way of getting the emissions levels down to where they need to be. And then, as we know, we have 2 geothermal projects within the group that we'll look at today, but on-site renewables and then purchase credits, that's the simple pathway. Getting it done in individual settings and individual sites is a lot more complicated. And in general, this is all about capital planning and asset management, much more than technology. And it's much more about operations than it is about capital investment. So there's a few truisms that are emerging from all of this. But this practical pathway to net zero, we know what the steps are. Now we just have to figure out how to make them work. Let's talk about the big report. These are the hospitals that taking part or are included in this year's analysis. There are 17 operational hospitals in this group. They add up to about 12.3 million square feet. As Michael said, if you are one of these hospitals and you don't know what your code is, because we do this reporting anonymously, we always let the individual hospitals know where they stand, but this is not about shaming. And we're going to recognize some of the top performers here today with their permission, because it is about celebrating top performers. It's not about shaming anybody. It's about helping everybody move up the benchmark chart to where they should be. So if you're one of these hospitals and you don't have your code, drop Michael either a chat or an email right now. He'll give you your code so you can follow the bouncing ball of your of where you stand relative to the data we're going to share today. The 2021 report is based on the calendar year 2020 data. This is the Greening Healthcare website. I hope that everybody knows where it is, because all of the good background research, all the previous reports are up at this location, but this is what the report looks like. We're really happy. Chris Mackey, I think you're on the call today. We're really happy to recognize Providence Care in Kingston as on the cover. We put a different hospital on each cover each year so that people don't mix them up and can't remember which one's which. But Providence Care, one of our top savers, and again, really instructional in terms of all of the hospitals that haven't yet reached the efficiency level that they should be capable of. what does it look like making that kind of progress over time? And we'll share a little bit of information on that going forward. The core results come in two forms. One is in terms of total energy use, and greening healthcare measures the efficiency of hospitals, and this is important, by comparing your actual baseline use to the top quartile energy target for our whole data set for your type of hospital. So when we talk about savings potential, it's comparing your actual current energy use with what the top quartile hospital of your type is doing right now. And that quartile improves a bit every year because everybody's slowly, incrementally improving. Those targets are adjusted for things like combined heat and power. They're adjusted for weather factors between different locations and from year to year. They're adjusted for things like central laundries and heat recovery chiller operations. So there's some well-documented, and all of these are found and documented on our website. So you'll see the whole methodology there. But this efficiency level says that a group of the hospitals at the top, many of which are these new P3 hospitals, those are pretty much at their targets already. But keep in mind, these targets are based on the whole data set, most of which are older hospitals. So we think this is working your way towards good practice, anything but best practice, and that there's a whole level to come in terms of efficiency improvements that we'll report on a go-forward basis. The dark shaded lines that have the code alongside them, those are the set of 17 P3 hospitals from Ontario right now. So you can see A1 at the top. You're going to hear several times A1 at the top is Humber River Hospital, which has met all of its energy targets. Then the various others, the C are continuing care, mental health, and so on. The A's are acute care hospitals. And what's of great interest is the number that aren't performing very well, even by comparison with older facilities there. So there's lots to learn from that group at the top because they've done it. They got it right. They've got to very high levels of efficiency. And there's lots to learn from the group at the bottom, which is what is not right yet that they're working on, and how can that be folded into the project development process for the more than 30 hospitals that are in the pipeline here, and I think something over 40 in the UK that are working their way through. So it's using the data, learning lessons and applying them so we keep getting better and better, as Michael said, to begin with. I want to take you one level deeper into this, but again, very briefly, all this is documented on the website and the white paper. But the analysis looks at both electricity use and gas use and separates out the weather sensitive part around cooling electricity from base electricity. So we'll show you in the next chart how those benchmark against each other with these facilities. But essentially we can have a hospital that has very efficient lighting and fans, that has good base electric, but really inefficient air conditioning equipment that has high cooling electric. So the benchmarking goes to base and weather sensitive components on the electrical front. And each of those relates to certain building systems, and that's what guides the conversations we have with the hospitals about where can they improve and what systems should they attend to. The same on the thermal side, except it's flipped the other way during the wintertime. It's ventilation and humidification and building envelope that drive the weather sensitive gas or oil or in the winter. And the base thermal is typically reheat and ventilation systems and the efficiency of the heating plant under summer type loads and the operation of process loads. So again, this is worth looking deeper into, because for any hospital out there, this analysis points you directly to where the opportunities are for you to join those top performers and achieve those high levels of efficiency that we're looking for. So this becomes a big part of your energy efficiency roadmap. How this plays out is in this chart, and I apologize for how kind of noisy it is, but all of this really matters. So the hospitals at the top of the benchmark we looked at before, A1, C2, C1, C5, and again, if you don't know who you are, drop a note to Michael. The base electricity use, again, you saw just a moment ago, it's lighting, it's fans, it's medical equipment, it's pumps, it's things that elevators, things that run year round. And with the current targets that we set, that you can see in the second column, that first group of 5 are all meeting that base electric target, which again, is not a particularly aggressive target. And one of the conversations we're having with the UK is that these top quartile levels on electricity are significantly lower with NHS hospitals. And that's one of the learnings we're looking to find out more about. What's more important is look at the red shaded ones there. Those are crazy high base electricity use that has to do with the systems that we refer to. The same applies to cooling. That's your actual cooling electricity. The target is weather normalized to wherever your location is. And where it's red or pink or orange, there's room for improvement there. So a number of the hospitals are close. On the thermal side, you'll see the much bigger difference. That base thermal, some of the hospitals at the bottom are crazy high. And again, they're adjusted for combined heat and power. They're adjusted if there's a laundry. Whereas if you look at A1 at the top, some of these numbers that are rising now are remarkably low because they have heat recovery chillers, technology, operational practices that are bringing the numbers down. But it's on the thermal side, which from our perspective is the primary in Ontario greenhouse gas emissions side, where the big opportunities are lying. And we're finding that with hospitals we're looking at across North America and elsewhere in the world. And that's kind of good news because typically those improvements can be made operationally without big capital. And that's going to be the biggest hit towards greenhouse gas emissions. We've circled, or Michael circled, a couple of, on the right-hand side of this chart, greenhouse gas emission numbers. Some hospitals getting around 2 kilograms per square foot. Those are good numbers. And those become some of the goals and the targets that we're setting for ourselves. If we look at the savings potential across this, and you may have seen this in the most recent announcement, if we look at the least efficient group of these hospitals, the utility cost implication is around it averages around $900,000 a year. Over a 30-year life with escalating carbon prices and everything else, you can multiply that number by about 50. So the decisions on design and operation of these facilities, these are like $45, $50 million decisions that are being called here. They're a big deal from an economic standpoint, they're a big deal from an environmental standpoint, and that is Greening Healthcare's goal in all of this, is to move the yardsticks and help everybody work up the benchmark charts that you looked at, and as Michael said, learn from those so that the next group of hospitals coming through will piggyback and be even better still. We just want to briefly recognize the top performers. So the 4 that are at the top there, the ones that have largely met their, again, good practice targets, not best practice targets, with Humber River, St. Joseph's in Hamilton, St. Joseph's Parkwood Institute in London, and William Osler Peel Memorial, and we'll hear a bit about that in just a moment. Peel Memorial right now is the lowest greenhouse gas emitter per square foot of all the hospitals in our data set. There's geothermal on that site. And again, we'll have part of our conversation later with the panel is going to be around how do you incorporate those kinds of, if you like, what have been non-traditional approaches and actually get them in place and make them work. But, you know, we owe a lot to these 4 hospitals for getting it right and giving us the opportunity to figure out what right looks like and then share it with everybody else. So congratulations to the 4 of you. We also want to talk about, and when you see the report, this is the whole chart that you see. So we've opened up 2 more columns here. Those columns are the change in energy use, weather normalized from the prior year. So the change from 2019 in electricity and thermal energy use. And again, we're going to look at a few of the hospitals that have had quite remarkable improvements, but the green numbers here are savings. So they've since over the past 12 months, by getting to grips with the operation of their facilities, they've achieved further efficiency improvements on the electrical side, and where it's red, by the way, they're creeping up a little bit. So again, if you're on this list, you can see that's what happened to you over the past 12 months. And we do want to talk to you about consolidating the savings and addressing the creeping increases. But within that, any double-digit number is a big deal. So you see 15% savings on the electrical side on C8. You can see an A5, and you'll hear more about that in just a second, 21% savings on gas, C8, 13%. So, but it's not consistent, and there are operational problems arising as well as operational success stories. And all of these matter, and they all contribute to the learning. Quick recognition, Women's College, and these charts, if you haven't seen them before, blue dots are the actual metered monthly energy consumption. So that's the actual consumption per month are the blue dots. The red dots are the weather normalized equivalent numbers for the baseline. So in this case, it's looking back to the first year the hospital was in operation. And what Michael's recorded up there is total energy savings are down by about 24%. And you can see the big savings electrically as the blue dots are kind of creeping down. And you can see the big effects both in the summer gas use in the lower chart and in the winter gas use. And from conversations with the hospital, this is operational stuff. This is taking the technology and making it work for you. And congratulations to Black and McDonald for the heavy work that they put in there to get these results. And they're still at it, they're still improving. Similar for Humber River and the work that JCI and the hospital are doing at Humber River, and the same effect. Electricity has come down a bit. And keep in mind that Humber River started as the most efficient hospital that we could find in our database. And these are the improvements it's made since, which is like, again, around almost 22.5% improvement in energy use by fine tuning and scheduling and working with the hospital departments to run what they've got better. And mentioned earlier, Chris Mackey and Providence Care Kingston. Again, this is a JCI project. And you can see how dramatic the improvements are right there. The goal of greening healthcare is to increasingly understand what happened, to package it. And we'll talk in a moment at the end about the Humber River Hospital case study we're preparing, to package that in a form that can be handed to the teams developing new hospitals. So as we've been saying, we can get it right the first time. These numbers are big, they matter, and we know how to do better, and we've just got to do it consistently. Final couple of thoughts. We're just beginning the path of international benchmarking, and since we've already shown Fiona this, the orange bars in there, if you can see them, these are UK hospitals. And the general trend is that their electricity use is significantly different than ours, that we're quite sure has to do with air conditioning and HVAC systems, but there are lessons to learn from there. And keep in mind, this is all weather normalized. So we know how mild and sunny it is in England all the time. That's not a factor here, that's adjusted out. But this idea, the practical pathway to get to where we're going begins with the best of existing facilities. As we're beginning international benchmarking, there will be big lessons to learn that may even extend to building codes and practices and standards and construction trends. So we've already initiated the Send Us Your Best challenge, and the summer of 2022 will hopefully be sharing much bigger international data set and have a few at least answers about where are the differences and why. We also just want to invite people into, there's a lot of interest in the high performing hospitals, but people don't know how to replicate it directly. So with the support of our local independent electrical systems operator, we've initiated a research project into system levels. So if you imagine, this is the interval metering data that I know we were talking about with Fiona, and things like lower values. This is hospital 2, and I'm willing to share that because they've seen it as Humber River. Hospital 1 is a less efficient hospital, where you see the valleys during the unoccupied periods. This is the electricity use from day to day, the green is weekends. Where you see the lower valleys, that is scheduling. They're shutting things off. That's a good thing. So we can use the advanced metering technology to help identify opportunities for better scheduling, as well as load reduction and weekend controls. We'll We're looking at the electrical breakdown in these hospitals from sub-metering data between chillers pumps, and it's a whole different webinar, but you can see some of the differences. And we look at the same thing on the thermal side, and there the differences are quite dramatic. And this is sub-meter data that's actual what the hospitals are using. So now at the systems level, we can compare the higher performing facilities with the lower performing facilities and provide even more specific direction as to where the improvements can be made. Angela and Cliff, I think you'll be interested in the design model that's AC4. The empirical data from real hospitals can be used to calibrate those design models. And not only can they be, they need to be, because a lot of those models are out significantly at the outset, often with assumptions about receptacle load and end user loads and so on. And that has an effect on the overall design and the overall performance going forward. So where this leads us is this is a big tent. This is a joint effort. We want as many people to help as we can, and we want to help everybody that we can. So on the Send Us Your Best challenge, please, if this recording will get seen around the world, find your best hospital, send them to us. Let's plug them into the charts, and let's find out the differences that can help all of us get better. And especially hospitals in Ontario, if you're in that 17 group, please do respond to Michael's invitation to join this research and help us through your sub-metering data to help you understand where the opportunities are to join that group of particular hospitals at the top of the benchmark chart. So, bit of a rush through, but this is the story so far, and you can peruse it at your leisure when the report's out at the end of the month. But the big deals for us so far that keep coming through, the targets really matter. Setting targets for hospitals really matters, and it's not an academic exercise. The likelihood is that where your hospital ends up is where you set the target to begin with, and that's certainly been Humber River's experience. What's driving them is to meet the target that was originally set. That operational improvements are as big a deal as design. Cliff Harvey in the panel will be talking about you need lead times. You can't design a better hospital if you don't have time. And I don't know how many times we've heard that's a really good idea, but we got to open in 3 years. There's no time to look at this, to consider it. Lead times really matter, and who gets involved when really matters. That in DBFM, design, build, finance, maintain projects, the FM, the facility management part, is just as important as the design, and that's kind of typically the low-cost stuff compared with the technology. The collaboration between the hospital and project co is essential to moving things forward, and that's the common factor in the hospitals with the big savings. And this is part of the whole idea of information sharing. We can't be reinventing the wheels. There's too many hospitals in the pipeline. We've got to share information between us to both improve the ones that are already built and to make sure that the new ones coming along do well.